A man stands at the edge of a flooded river, 40 years of desert behind him, an unknown land stretching ahead. He is not young. He has outlasted an entire generation of doubt and fear, watched friends and elders fall in the wilderness one by one, and now the full weight of a nation rests on his shoulders alone. The great Moses is gone, voice silenced in the hills of Moab, and every pair of eyes in that enormous camp turns to this warrior, this spy, this quiet and faithful servant. His name is Joshua, and what follows is one of the most dramatic, morally complicated, and profoundly human stories the ancient world ever produced. We are going to walk through all of it, his strange beginnings, his decades in Moses' shadow, the spy mission that nearly ended everything before it started, the flooding river that should have stopped an army cold, the walls that fell without a single siege engine being built, the long and brutal campaigns through Canaan, and finally, the quiet, devastating truth about how this warrior's story actually ends. Because Joshua is almost always remembered for one famous battle, what most people do not know is that his full life is stranger, richer, and far more surprising than any single crumbling wall. Let us start at the very beginning, because Joshua's origin is itself a small mystery. His name, in Hebrew, Yehoshua, means something close to God saves, or the Lord is salvation. That name would prove, over the course of his life, to be something close to a prophecy. He was born in Egypt during the generations of Israelite slavery, from the tribe of Ephraim. His father was a man named Nun, and that is very nearly all we are told about his childhood. No miraculous birth story, no burning bush, no vision in the night. Joshua arrives in the biblical record almost fully formed, a young fighter at exactly the moment he is needed, which tells you something important. The text treats him as a man defined not by where he came from, but entirely by what he chose to do. The first time we actually see Joshua in action is shortly after the Exodus from Egypt, in the wilderness of the Sinai Desert. A tribe called the Amalekites attacks the Israelites, a brutal, exhausted column of recently freed slaves, and Moses makes a decision that reveals a great deal about how he saw this young man. He does not ask a priest, or an elder, or one of his own family members. He calls for Joshua. Choose men, Moses tells him, and go fight the Amalekites. No briefing, no military manual, no reassurance, just an order and a trust that Joshua will figure it out. He does. The battle at a place called Rephidim is won, and Joshua walks away from it as the closest thing the Israelites have to a general. From that point forward, Joshua becomes Moses' right hand in a way that goes beyond military rank. He is described as Moses' assistant or attendant, a word in Hebrew that carries real intimacy, not a subordinate who salutes and walks away, but someone who stays. When Moses goes up Mount Sinai to receive the law, it is Joshua who goes part of the way with him. When Moses meets with God in the tent of meeting, a portable sanctuary the Israelites set up whenever they camped, Joshua is described as the one who stays in the tent even after Moses has returned to the camp. He is absorbing something, watching, learning not just tactics, but the weight of leadership, what it costs a man to carry a nation, and what it means to hear a voice that does not come from any human throat. But the defining moment of Joshua's early life, the one that will determine everything that comes after, arrives in the second year after the Exodus, when Moses sends 12 spies into the land of Canaan. The spies' mission is exactly what it sounds like: reconnaissance. 12 men, one from each tribe, slip into this strange and reportedly abundant land and come back with a report. They bring physical evidence, a single cluster of grapes, said to be so large it required 2 men and a carrying pole to transport. 40 days of observation, and then 12 men stand before the entire Israelite community with wildly different conclusions. 10 of the spies are terrified. Yes, the land flows with milk and honey, they say. Yes, it is extraordinary. But the people who live there are enormous and powerful. The cities are fortified and vast, and compared to the inhabitants, the spies say, we felt like grasshoppers. That image, grasshoppers, is one of the most psychologically raw moments in the whole story. 10 trained men, veterans of the Exodus, reduced to that word in their own estimation. 2 spies disagree entirely. One is a man named Caleb, the other is Joshua. Caleb tears his clothes, a sign of distress, of urgency, and pleads with the people not to be afraid. Joshua stands beside him and says something that must have sounded almost reckless in that moment. If God is pleased with us, he will bring us into this land and give it to us. Do not be afraid of the people there. What follows is one of the more stunning reversals you will find in ancient literature. The crowd, flooded with fear, talks openly about going back to Egypt, back to slavery, and briefly considers stoning Joshua and Caleb where they stand. It is that close. 2 men against the momentum of an entire terrified nation. The consequences of that day shape the next 4 decades. Because of the failure of nerve at Kadesh Barnea, God declares that the generation which stood there and chose fear over faith will not enter the land. They will wander in the wilderness until every last one of them has died. 40 years, 1 year for each day, the spies were in Canaan. Joshua and Caleb, the 2 dissenters, are explicitly exempted. They will survive to see the land. Everyone else will not. Think about what that means for Joshua personally. He knows, from that day forward, that he is going to outlive almost everyone around him. Friends, peers, the entire generation he grew up with in Egypt. He watches them age and fall in the desert for 4 decades, carrying the knowledge of a promise that belongs entirely to the future. That kind of patient waiting, faithful and grief-stricken at the same time, is not the stuff of action hero mythology. It is something quieter and harder, and I think it is one of the most underappreciated parts of Joshua's character. When the 40 years finally close, when the last of that original generation has died, Moses himself is told that his own time is at an end. He will see the promised land from a mountaintop, but will not set foot in it. And before he goes, he lays his hands on Joshua in a formal transfer of leadership, a ritual commissioning that the text describes with real solemnity. God then speaks to Joshua directly, perhaps for the first time, with words that have echoed across religions and cultures for thousands of years. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. I will be with you wherever you go. Those are not small words to receive. They are also not easy words to live up to when you are looking at a flooded river. The Jordan River, when the Israelites arrive at its banks, is at flood stage. We are told explicitly that it has overflowed all its banks, as it apparently did every spring. There is no ford. There is no obvious way across for a company of people that, depending on how you read the numbers, could have numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Joshua orders the priests to carry the Ark of the Covenant, a sacred chest understood to represent God's presence, into the river, and according to the account, the moment the priests' feet touch the water, the river stops. It piles up upstream, and the entire nation crosses on dry ground. The Israelites set up 12 stones at the crossing point, 1 for each tribe, as a memorial. Joshua tells them explicitly, when your children ask what these stones mean, you will tell them what happened here today. That detail, the stones, the question the children will one day ask, tells you something about Joshua's mind. He is already thinking about memory, about what comes after, about how you make sure a story does not get lost. Now the campaign begins, and this is where the historical and theological complexity of Joshua's story becomes genuinely difficult to hold in 2 hands at once. The first major engagement is Jericho, a walled city in the Jordan Valley and one of the oldest continuously occupied settlements in the ancient Near East. The famous account, 7 priests, 7 trumpets, 7 days of marching around the walls, and on the 7th day, 7 circuits before the trumpets blow and the people shout, is among the most iconic passages in all of Scripture. The walls, we are told, fall flat. The city is taken. A woman named Rahab, who had hidden the Israelite spies before the campaign and hung a scarlet cord from her window as a signal, is saved along with her family, a moment of mercy and kept promise threaded through a story of enormous destruction. Archaeologists have debated Jericho extensively. The site has been excavated multiple times, and the evidence is genuinely contested. Layers of occupation, evidence of destruction, debates about which stratum corresponds to which historical period. I want to be honest with you about this. Mainstream scholarship has not settled the question of a historical Joshua in the way that we might like. The debate is real and ongoing, and reasonable people read the same evidence differently. What is clear is that Jericho is a real place with a long and layered past, and that the memory of its capture was important enough to anchor the entire Canaan narrative. From Jericho, Joshua's campaigns move into the hill country. There is a setback at a smaller town called Ai, traced in the text to a violation of the rules of holy war. A man named Achan has taken forbidden plunder, and the consequence falls on the whole community. The weight of collective responsibility, the idea that one person's hidden transgression can break the entire group, is a theme that runs through Joshua's leadership in ways that still feel morally uncomfortable. There are no easy readings here. After Ai falls, the campaigns continue. A coalition of southern kings, alarmed by Jericho and Ai, gathers to fight. It is during this southern campaign that we get the most spectacular and most debated moment in Joshua's military career. The battle where Joshua commands the sun and moon to stand still, and according to the text, they do, giving the Israelites time to finish the battle before dark. Scholars and theologians have offered every possible interpretation of this passage, from the literal to the poetic to an ancient description of an eclipse. I have no settled answer to give you, and I suspect no one does. But I find it deeply interesting that the text does not treat it as the greatest miracle of Joshua's career. It almost mentions it in passing, as if stopping the sun is the kind of thing that can happen when the moment calls for it. The northern coalition falls next, led by a king named Jabin of Hazor. Hazor itself, a major site in what is now northern Israel, has been extensively excavated, and there is genuine archaeological evidence of destruction layers that some researchers have associated with this period, though the dating remains debated. After the major campaigns, Joshua begins the enormous administrative task of dividing the conquered territories among the 12 tribes, a process that takes up much of the second half of the book that bears his name, and that honestly can feel like reading a very old property registry. But underneath all those boundary descriptions is something real, the attempt to give structure and permanence to a people who have spent 40 years without a fixed home. If you have been on this journey with Scholar Eli for a while, you know this is the kind of story we love, one where the military drama is only half of it, and the human negotiation underneath turns out to be just as fascinating. If you are new here, welcome, subscribe, and come along, because we are just getting to the most surprising part of Joshua's life. Joshua does not die in battle. He does not fall to an enemy sword or a foreign arrow. He lives to be, according to the text, 110 years old, the same age at death, interestingly, as Joseph centuries before him, which may or may not be coincidence, depending on how you read the symbolic arithmetic of ancient literature. He gathers the leaders of Israel at a place called Shechem for what amounts to his farewell address. It is remarkable. He does not claim credit. He runs through the entire history of his people, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, the Exodus, the wilderness, all of it, and frames every moment as something that was done for them rather than by them. Then he puts a choice in front of them with a directness that has no softening edge. Choose this day whom you will serve. Other gods are available, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. That phrase, as for me and my house, has been quoted, stitched onto pillows, painted on walls, printed on signs, for thousands of years. What gets overlooked is the context in which Joshua says it. He is not speaking from a position of triumph and ease. He is an old man, laying down a life of relentless obedience, and he knows well enough to understand that the moment he is gone, the choice might not hold. He is right. The text tells us that Israel served God throughout the lifetime of Joshua and the elders who outlived him. And then, With that generation also gone, things begin to change. The book that follows Joshua in the biblical canon is Judges, and its opening chapters are not a celebration of legacy preserved, they are a record of memory beginning to fray. Joshua is buried at Timnath-Serah in the hill country of Ephraim, his own tribal territory. The land he was born enslaved in, wandered for 40 years, fought for another 7 or more. A whole long human life from bondage to burial, with very little rest anywhere in the middle. So what do we make of him? What does the complete life of Joshua actually mean, all these thousands of years later? Here is what strikes me most. Joshua is not a character who seeks the spotlight. He does not write his own legend. He is chosen, trained quietly, tested at Kadesh Barnea when it cost something to tell the truth, and then handed authority he did not campaign for. His greatness, if that is the right word, is almost entirely in his consistency. The same man at the river's edge as he was 40 years before, still trusting, still stepping forward when the ground looks impossible. That quality does not make for the flashiest hero, but it is the kind of character that actually holds a nation together long enough to give it a future. There is still so much scholars' debate about the historical Joshua, the timeline, the archaeology, the scope of the conquests, what really happened at Jericho, and what the evidence actually tells us. And I think those debates are worth having, honestly, rather than wishing them away. The mystery does not shrink the story. If anything, it deepens it. A life this consequential, this carefully remembered, and this carefully contested, is a life that is still doing something in the world. What do you think? Was Joshua a historical general, a theological ideal, or some layered combination of the two? Leave your answer in the comments. I read them, and this particular conversation, I think, could go some extraordinary places. If the story of Joshua has you wanting to go even deeper into the world of ancient Israel and its neighbors, the next video on this channel takes a close look at the world Joshua was actually fighting into, the cities, the cultures, and the kingdoms of Canaan that the ancient texts describe. You might be surprised what the archaeology says. If you have been here for this whole journey and you are not subscribed yet, now is the moment. Every week, we go deep into the mysteries and stories of the ancient world, and I would love to have you with us. Until next time, thank you for being curious.